My name is Erina. I'm 28, a senior nurse in a pediatric trauma unit, and up until last year, I still believed loyalty meant something. I thought family was supposed to be a place of shelter, not strategy. I thought love was built, not borrowed. I was wrong on all three counts. If you had told me a year ago that my older sister would not only steal the man I was planning to marry, but then have the audacity to send me a hand-addressed wedding invitation, I would have laughed, bitterly maybe. But I would have laughed because that kind of betrayal belongs in books, not in real life, certainly not mine. But there I was, alone in my kitchen, holding a thick ivory envelope between my fingers, reading the calligraphed names of the two people who had ripped my life in half, Jessa Carr and Trevor Alden. The ceremony was to be held 4 months after the wedding I had planned. Same vineyard, same date. At first, I tossed the invitation in the trash. Then I pulled it back out. Then I laughed, sharp and sudden, the kind of laugh that tears your throat on the way out. I didn't go to that wedding to cause a scene. But what happened there? It spoke louder than I ever could. Trevor and I had been together for 3 years. He was a defense attorney, sharp, well-groomed, the kind of man who carried a leather briefcase and made you feel like you were being deposed even when he was just asking how your day went. He had charm, polished to a gleam, and I mistook it for stability. We met through mutual friends, dated steadily, and eventually moved in together. To everyone else, we looked like the picture of a well-balanced couple. I brought calm, he brought ambition. I managed chaos in an emergency room. He argued with judges for a living. We worked. At least, I thought we did. Jessa, my sister, was the kind of person people watched when she walked into a room. She had long, blonde hair that fell in careless waves, blue eyes too wide to be trustworthy, and a smile sharp enough to cut glass. Our family always forgave her, no matter the lie, the mess, or the fallout. That's just Jessa, they said, as if that excused everything. When Trevor and I got engaged, she reacted exactly as I expected. Over the top excited, hugging me too hard, then pulling me close to whisper, "You always pick the boring ones. Maybe this one will actually keep you awake." I remember laughing, brushing it off. Jessa had always been the chaos to my order, the spark to my silence. I thought she was teasing. But then came the small things. The way she laughed too loud at his jokes. The way his gaze lingered a half-second too long when she entered the room. One Thursday, I came home early and found them in our apartment. Just the two of them, drinking wine like they were old friends, in no rush to explain themselves. She said she stopped by to return a book. He said she just stayed for a glass. Their smiles were too tight. That night, Trevor was quiet. He didn't touch me, didn't ask how my shift had gone, just sat on the couch, scrolling his phone like the rest of the world was more interesting than anything I could say. Over the next few weeks, that space between us widened. His phone became a permanent extension of his hand. He took more weekend trips for work. When I asked questions, he turned defensive, accusing me of being paranoid, jealous, insecure. I started doubting my own instincts, started telling myself I was being crazy. Until one night, he looked at me across the kitchen table and said, "I think we need a break. I don't feel the same anymore." There was no fight, no incident, just silence. And then he left. 2 weeks later, his side of the closet was empty. The key was on the counter. The apartment felt hollow, like it had been gutted while I wasn't looking. I went to work. I smiled at patients. I charted medications. I didn't eat much, didn't talk much either. No one knew what to say to me, and I didn't know how to ask for help. I kept it all inside, until the day I saw the photo. It was on Jessa's Instagram story, blurry, taken at some loud bar. Her, grinning like she'd won something. And next to her, Trevor, with his arm draped around her shoulders and his hand unmistakably resting on her thigh. My stomach flipped. I stared at that photo like it had teeth. I messaged her. No reply. I called, straight to voicemail. The next day, she blocked me. The days after that were a fog. I floated through them, like my body was still showing up, but my mind hadn't caught up yet. I didn't tell my parents. I didn't tell anyone. What was there to say? That my sister and my fiancé had quietly burned my life down while I was busy folding laundry and believing in people. Even if I had said it out loud, who would have believed me? Instead, I kept moving. Wake up, go to work, tend to sick kids, be useful, be invisible. The only time I felt anything close to real was during a code blue, when everything was loud and urgent and left no room for grief. That's how I met Graham Maddox. He was a trauma surgeon rotating through our hospital, filling in while one of our regulars was out on paternity leave. I first saw him during a late-night emergency. He was calm, surgical in his precision, quiet but commanding. His hands never trembled. His eyes never darted. I didn't think much of it at first. I didn't have room in my brain for admiration, let alone interest. But he started showing up in the same elevators, the same break rooms, the same after-shift coffee spots. He wasn't charming in the way Trevor had been. He didn't compliment people to get something in return. He listened, closely, and when he spoke, it was like every word had been tested for value before being said. We started with small things: shared coffee, short walks to the parking garage. It felt easy, no effort, no games. One night, we ended up talking for 2 hours in my car, just sitting in the hospital lot with our doors still shut. And for the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe without shattering. Eventually, I told him everything. Not all at once, but in pieces. The proposal, the betrayal, the photo, and then the invitation. I remember showing it to him, half expecting him to laugh or look uncomfortable. But he didn't. He just studied the envelope like it was a case file and then said, "Let's go." I blinked. "What?" "To the wedding," he said plainly. "You deserve to be seen. Let them realize what they gave up." I shook my head. "That's not who I am." "No," he said, "but it's who they think you aren't. Maybe it's time they see they were wrong." I didn't answer right away. But later that night, as I brushed my teeth and looked at my tired reflection in the mirror, I knew he was right. I wasn't going to that wedding to seek revenge. I was going because I wanted to take myself out of the role they had written for me. I wasn't the silent second-place sister anymore. So I RSVP'd yes. The weeks that followed were quiet, intentional. I picked out a navy silk dress that made me feel like I belonged in my own story again. Graham had his suit tailored, not because he cared about appearances, but because he believed in honoring the moment. We didn't rehearse anything, didn't plan drama. We were just going to show up, walk in, sit down, say nothing. But sometimes nothing speaks volumes. The vineyard looked exactly like the photos I had once saved on my wedding planning board. Rows of white chairs arranged in perfect symmetry, ivory linens fluttering under soft Virginia wind, and a floral arch that must have cost more than my rent. Everything screamed curated elegance. We arrived fashionably late, on purpose. The ceremony had already started. A quartet played under the shade of ancient oak trees. Guests turned their heads slightly as we made our way down the side aisle, whispers trailing us like perfume. Graham moved with quiet confidence, one hand resting at my back. He didn't look around. He didn't need to. I felt every pair of eyes, though. I didn't flinch. At the altar stood Jessa, all lace and smugness, glowing in a gown that probably came with its own Instagram hashtag. Her blonde hair was pulled into a soft updo, makeup flawless. She looked like she belonged in a bridal magazine. Trevor stood next to her, polished but pale, jaw tight. I recognized that look. It was the same one he had when he knew he was losing a case. Halfway through the officiant's speech, Jessa did what Jessa always did. She made it about herself. She turned toward the guests, interrupted without hesitation, and grabbed the mic. "I just want to say something really quick before we exchange vows," she said, her voice chipper, eyes scanning the crowd until they landed on me. "It's funny, really. Trevor actually proposed to my sister first. I guess I was the right fit all along." Laughter rippled. Nervous, uneasy. I felt my face flush, not from shame, but from how predictably small her moment was. Before I could react, Graham stood. No dramatic gesture, no raised voice. He simply straightened his jacket, stepped forward, and said with calm clarity, "Actually, I'm her upgrade." The silence wasn't awkward. It was surgical, sharp, clean, like the air had been sliced open. Heads turned. Someone gasped. A woman in the second row whispered, "Oh my God." As the realization hit, they saw him not just as the man beside me, but as Graham Maddox. The Maddox name, the one etched into hospital wings and university buildings, a name that carried legacy. Jessa's smirk collapsed. Trevor looked like he forgot how to breathe. Even the officiant looked unsure whether to continue. Graham sat beside me again, legs crossed, expression neutral. I didn't say a word. I didn't need to. That moment, simple, precise, did more damage than any outburst ever could. It was the kind of thing people would whisper about for years. Jessa tried to recover. She laughed, a forced sound, and said something about family being unpredictable. Her voice cracked, and she rushed her vows, avoiding eye contact. The ceremony limped to a close. There was polite applause, but most guests kept glancing at our row. She had invited me to be humiliated. Instead, she gave me a stage. The reception was over-decorated and underwhelming. Crystal chandeliers hung above tables, weighed down by floral arrangements, so dense they blocked eye contact. A string trio played classical renditions of pop songs, but no one seemed to be listening. They were too busy watching us. I was seated at a table in the farthest corner, next to a distant cousin, and a woman who kept mispronouncing my name. Graham didn't mind. He sat beside me, quietly sipping wine and scanning the room like he was auditing it. Toasts began. Jessa's maid of honor slurred her way through something about loyalty and fate. Trevor's best man made a joke about second chances that drew the kind of laughter people offer when they don't know what else to do. Through it all, I stayed silent. But I could feel the stares. I wasn't the sideshow they expected. I was the pivot point they couldn't stop circling back to. Then, as the music shifted into a slow dance, Graham took my hand. We moved across the dance floor, unhurried. For the first time in a long while, I didn't feel like a shadow of someone else's story. I felt seen, real, whole. That's when Trevor approached. He didn't come straight over. He lingered near the bar, glanced our way, then eventually cut across the floor to where we danced. "Can I talk to you?" he asked. I looked at Graham. He gave a nod and stepped back. Trevor led me to a quiet corner near the exit. He didn't speak at first, just looked at me like he was seeing a version of me he'd never bothered to notice. "You look different," he said finally. "I am." He shifted awkwardly. "I didn't think you'd come." "I almost didn't." "I know things. Happened fast with Jessa," he said, eyes low. "I didn't mean to hurt you." "But you did." "I'm sorry," he said, "for how I handled everything. You didn't deserve that." I believed he meant it, in that moment. But I also knew it didn't matter. "You could have been honest," I said. "You didn't have to lie. You could have left clean." He nodded slowly. "I know." But knowing wasn't enough. He wasn't here for forgiveness. He was here to rewrite his part in the story, to pretend he had integrity all along. I turned without another word. Graham was already waiting near the garden doors. I walked back to him, my heels clicking with purpose. Behind me, Trevor remained in the shadows, still trying to make sense of what he had lost, and why he couldn't get it back. The rest of the night played like a tired performance. Guests drank too much. Jessa flitted between tables, her smile more strained with each lap. Trevor disappeared for long stretches. At one point, I saw them sitting on opposite ends of the bridal table, barely speaking. It wasn't a meltdown. It was worse. It was indifference. Graham and I stayed an hour longer. I caught up with cousins I hadn't seen in years, laughed with people who didn't know the backstory, and watched from a distance as the fairy tale slowly unraveled. Every so often, someone would ask Graham what he did, and the second he answered, the tone of the conversation would shift. His name carried weight, quiet, unmistakable weight. Jessa noticed. She stared more than once. Once she even took a few steps in my direction, like she wanted to say something, but she stopped, turned, and walked away. Maybe she sensed the power had shifted, or maybe she knew nothing she said would stick anymore. Eventually, we left. The valet brought Graham's car around, and as we pulled away from the vineyard, I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding for months. Graham glanced over but said nothing. He didn't have to. The silence said everything. The ripples started a week later. I didn't hear from Jessa. Not a text, not a passive-aggressive post. But I did hear from someone else, an associate from Trevor's law firm. She sent a polite email saying she hoped I was well, and then added, almost as a footnote, "There's been a lot of talk here since the wedding." Apparently, Graham's name caused a stir. Several of Trevor's clients were longtime Maddox family donors. Word got around that the ex at the wedding wasn't just some scorned woman. She'd shown up with someone powerful, poised, and clearly uninterested in staying quiet. It didn't take long for whispers to become rumors. I didn't start them, but I didn't correct them either. That Jessa had pursued Trevor before our breakup, that she orchestrated the wedding to outshine mine, that she invited me to gloat and ended up humiliated instead. The more people talked, the more Trevor's image crumbled. Clients backed away. His firm started questioning his judgment. And just like that, the reputation he worked so hard to build began to fracture. 6 weeks later, my phone rang. Late. Jessa's name lit up the screen. I let it ring. Then, at the last second, I answered. "Hello?" She hesitated. "It's me." I didn't speak. "I need to talk to you," she said, her voice thin. He's leaving. Trevor. He moved out, took everything. He said I pushed him into it, that I used him to get at you. He said he never even wanted to marry me." Still, I stayed quiet. "He blames me for everything, for the fallout, the firm, the wedding." I leaned back on the couch, phone pressed to my ear. She sounded raw, unraveling. "I didn't think it would turn out like this." There it was, not remorse, regret. "I'm sorry you're hurting," I said finally. It wasn't forgiveness, but it was more than she deserved. "Do you think we could talk? Like, really talk? Maybe try again?" I took a long breath. "You didn't want a sister, Jessa," I said. "You wanted a stage." Then I hung up. 2 months later, Jessa moved back to our hometown. She took a job waitressing at a cafe near the interstate, started a YouTube channel about healing from toxic relationships. It never made it past 50 views. People from back home would mention her sometimes, say they saw her, quiet, hair tied back, smiling a little too hard. I just nodded politely. I had no interest in revisiting the drama she built her identity around. As for Trevor, he left the firm quietly, tried to open his own practice, but without the right clients or connections, it never took off. Last I heard, he moved to Atlanta. He called once. I didn't answer. Graham and I didn't rush anything. After that night, we both knew we weren't building something out of reaction or pain. We were just living. We traveled, we cooked. We made space for each other's silence. A year later, he proposed. No fireworks, no grand declarations. Just a quiet Sunday morning, coffee on the stove, sunlight slipping through the blinds. He said, "Would you want to do this forever?" And I said, "Yes." We were married in a garden in Asheville. 30 guests, no speeches, no orchestras, just laughter, real and unperformed. My parents were there, a few friends, and no one who felt the need to toast to second chances. No one trying to win. That was the difference. For a long time, I thought silence was weakness, that letting people walk over you and saying nothing made you small. But now I understand. There's power in stillness, in walking away without burning down the room, in letting people destroy themselves while you rebuild. Jessa didn't win. Trevor didn't win. They ended up exactly where they always were, chasing someone else's spotlight, mistaking attention for affection. And me? I didn't win either. I just walked away, whole,